This presentation is on learner-focused formative assessment. I'm Natalie Jameson-Warren, the Quality Manager here at Derby Adult Learning Service. We're going to be looking at learner-focused formative assessment, including why is it important, and a practical approach to it, and how it can be used to drive teaching and learning. So why is formative assessment important? It's a way of monitoring learning and providing feedback so that learners can make progress by understanding their strengths and weaknesses. How can I or a tutor use it? They can use it to gain feedback on teaching and develop strategies to track and monitor learners to ensure progress is being made. It also identifies how to support learners more appropriately and stretch and challenge them more effectively. How can learners use it? They can use it to reflect on their own progress. It aids their motivation and can help inspire them. It can help them take responsibility for their own learning and encourage independence. The slide in front of you shows a teaching, assessment and learning cycle. This was produced by Tony Davis, who was previously an Ofsted inspector and now currently works as an education consultant. Now, often we see teaching, assessment and learning as teaching, learning and assessment. However, he's tweaked this slightly. Now, the reason why this has been tweaked slightly is that we're focusing on assessment after some teaching has been provided. So formative assessment after delivery enables learners to reflect on progress made and how they can adjust their learning and commitment and motivation. It also provides a snapshot of progress made, which informs further learning in order to build on existing knowledge and skills. It also helps gauge how deeply a topic or key concept has been learned and what actions need to be taken to ensure further learning or progress is made and achieved. Now, I've taken some quotes from the Ofsted's Education Inspection Framework. So on the next few slides, these are direct quotes from that handbook. So the first one, teachers use assessment to check learners' understanding in order to inform teaching. Learners use assessment to help learners to embed and use knowledge fluently, to develop their understanding and to gain, extend and improve their skills and not simply memorise disconnected facts. So those two quotes there, they really focus on the importance of checking on understanding before moving on to another topic, so that learners aren't just memorising information, they're really learning it and understanding it, so they're gaining that knowledge to a deep extent that they can then use fluently in another situation and apply it to another situation, therefore demonstrating a high-level thinking skill. This quote here says, "When used effectively, assessment can help learners to embed and use knowledge fluently and to show that they are competent in applying their skills. The results of effective assessment assist teachers to produce clear and achievable next steps for learners. However, assessment is too often carried out in a way that creates unnecessary burdens for staff and learners. It is therefore important that leaders and teachers understand its limitations and avoid misuse and overuse." Two more quotes here. "Inspectors will evaluate how assessment supports the teaching of the curriculum while not driving teachers towards excessive individualisation, differentiation or interventions that are almost impossible to deliver without lowering expectations of some learners and/or driving up teachers' workload." Second quote, "They will consider the way teachers teach and assess to support learners to build on their knowledge and to apply that knowledge as skills." We've got three more quotes here. So the first one, "The curriculum enables the evaluation of learners' knowledge and understanding against those expectations. Teachers check learners' understanding effectively and identify and correct misunderstandings. The curriculum is sequenced so that knowledge and skills build on what learners know and can do, and learners work towards defined endpoints." Now, taking these quotes into consideration, this strategy that I'm going to introduce now, and that is already in place at Dow's, is something that really encapsulates those key areas of what Ofsted really want assessment to be and guidance on how we should use assessment. Now, of course, we're not doing any of this for Ofsted. However, we need to take what the Ofsted Education Inspection Framework says into consideration, as it is our quality standard and we need to judge ourselves against it, and it's what we as an organisation are judged against during an inspection as well. So this strategy, it's quite a simple strategy. I can't take credit for it because I've used it when I was working in offender learning. However, it worked really well when working with offenders, and I wanted to share it with everybody here at Dow's. So the screen in front of you, you can see two acronyms and then a phrase. So we've got what went well, WWW, EBI, even better if, and then next steps. So by using those acronyms into learner-focused formative assessment, it can prove quite effective in really targeting and driving reflection, progress, so that learners are working towards challenging targets and building on those existing knowledge and skills. So how can we actually incorporate this as a practical approach here at Dow's? So the first things first is a formative feedback form, which I'm going to go through in a moment. So a formative feedback form, this has got the acronyms written on there, and it's just simply a form. If you wanted to have it photocopied on coloured paper so it stands out in a learner folder, or complete it electronically, or with the landscape changing and teaching and learning moving a lot more online, it can be done online as well. So it's a formative feedback form to capture the what went well, even better if, and next steps. So both a tutor can complete it and a learner can complete it if they want to do a self-assessment of their own work, or even a peer assessment of that work as well. It could also be used when learners are delivering presentations or discussions. They could complete it for their peers also. So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is using acronyms on written work. So if you don't like a lot of paperwork, this might work for you, whereby you simply just write WWW, EBI and next steps on a piece of written work or on a presentation, just handwritten or typed. So that's another way of doing it. You don't have to use the specific form. Another way is using these acronyms in a voice recording. So again, this is quite an accessible way for learners to receive feedback, obviously because they can listen to it over again. It's a lot more personable and it's a lot better for learners that benefit from having verbal feedback. So again, you can use it in a voice recording. So again, with online learning, this is something that can be recorded on your phone or a recording software on a computer, and it could be emailed, it could be shared, it could be saved on devices such as a Padlet, etc. It can be embedded into ILP reflections. So a lot of learners struggle when they're completing their ILPs in identifying what they've achieved and what they need to do next. So again, if you're incorporating those acronyms into the ILP, that when they review the progress that they've made at the end of the lesson, it's one way to really narrow down what the learners have achieved and what they need to move on to next. It also avoids these generic comments that a lot of learners make, such as "I enjoyed the lesson" or "thank you," which, although those are nice, it doesn't actually say anything, and it doesn't say what they've learned and what they need to move on to and what they need to achieve. So again, this is a strategy that can be incorporated into ILP reflections. Also, if a learner has received some feedback or carried out some feedback using these acronyms, if they struggle to complete their ILP at the end of the lesson, the information on these documents or the verbal feedback using these acronyms that they've received can be incorporated into their ILP as well. So it can provide inspiration as to what to say when they're reflecting on their progress made in the lesson. Now, one way that I've seen it work really well is used verbally as a starter or a plenary. So, for example, it might be used as a starter at the beginning of the lesson and saying to a student, what were your next steps from last lesson? And that is then encouraging them to recall that knowledge, to then take responsibility for their learning and motivate them with what they've got to do for that lesson. It can also be used as a plenary. So, for example, if you've got a few minutes left at the end of the lesson, saying, well, what do you need to do better next lesson? What are your next steps when you come back next time? So again, it's getting them to think about what they need to work on next, getting them to think about their learning when they leave the classroom, and it encourages that responsibility and that independence as well. It can be used to stretch and challenge. So, for example, if a learner's done a really good piece of work, you know, the worst thing is just putting good work, you've worked really hard today, because again, that doesn't say anything. So it can be used to stretch and challenge. So, for example, if they've completed a really good piece of work, it could be their next steps could be then to apply the skills such as A, B and C to their summative exam, or apply it to a presentation, or even demonstrate what they've achieved today to appear next lesson or later on in the lesson. So it can be used as a tool to stretch and challenge. I've already mentioned that it can be used for peer feedback. So again, it's not just about the teacher using these acronyms, it's about incorporating it and embedding it into normal classroom or online delivery. So if the teacher starts using these acronyms, the students will start to use these acronyms, and it's about you embedding this mindset into the delivery so that learners start saying, when they're carrying out peer feedback or when they're assessing themselves, what's gone well today, what do I need to do better next time, so the EBI, and then what are my next steps. So it can be used between peers, it can be used with the learner on a one-to-one basis as well. And then finally, we've got classroom displays. So before lockdown, you may have noticed every classroom, all the centres and DELs have got a what went well, even better if, and next steps display in the classroom to refer to during the lesson. And again, it's kind of embedding it into the mindset. Now, from September, it is highly unlikely that we're going to be delivering a lot in classrooms due to social distancing. So in order to kind of tackle this, you might want to have the picture of the classroom displays off this PowerPoint and off this presentation to have as part of your Derby Learn resources. If you wanted to type it out, you're more than welcome to incorporate it somewhere, perhaps into your presentation, so that we're thinking about alternative and creative ways of still displaying the same messages, but in a much more accessible way that's suitable for online delivery. So the most important thing when we're giving learner-focused formative feedback using these what went well, even better if, and next steps acronyms, it's about making it smart. It's not about over-assessing, so it's not about writing paragraphs and paragraphs of feedback, because one, it's a laborious task for the tutor. It's one way of over-assessing, and also it's unlikely that the learner is really going to read it and take it on board. So it's about making it sharp, straight to the point, perhaps bullet points, and making it smart, making it specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. So, for example, when you're writing and considering the next steps, think about how you can make them smart targets, so that if they've got these smart targets, they can incorporate these smart targets into their ILPs, which again solves the issue that a lot of learners struggle with setting their own smart targets. Therefore, if they've got smart targets on their formative feedback, they can incorporate these into their ILP, and they're getting used to this whole system of working. Another good way of having smart targets as part of the formative feedback is that it really cuts down your workload when it comes to the planning of your lessons. So, for example, if if you've got a copy of the targets, or if you can remember what the targets are, or if you have got access to the learner folders, you can have a look at these targets and plan your lessons around those, so that you're really demonstrating planning to meet individual learning needs, so that you're not just delivering a one-size-fits-all lesson. You're really tailoring your intent and your delivery and your teaching and learning strategies to meet the individual needs, because you're taking their SMART targets into consideration. So we're not talking about, if you've got a class of 12 different lessons. We're talking about how you can incorporate the key themes and their key targets within your lesson, whether it's for the whole lesson or part of the lesson. So actually it does reduce your workload. Previously, when I worked in offender learning, the learner-focused formative assessment formed the backbone of all my planning for learning, and it made my life so much easier, because we weren't allowed to take any work home with us, and because resources were limited, time was tight. So by using the learner-focused formative feedback form, we use that a lot, but even just the acronyms on the written work, or the other methods that I've talked about, by using that information, that really helped me plan my lessons succinctly and made sure that I was planning to meet individual needs. And therefore, that meant that all learners made progress every single lesson. It's also good to make it SMART because it's measurable and achievable for the learner. So for example, if you've got a learner that might be a little bit disengaged or a little bit demotivated and they're not sure on what to do, you can refer them to their SMART targets at the bottom of their learner feedback sheet, or their written feedback on their written work or typed work, and say, well, actually, what are your SMART targets? What have you written in your ILP? What's it got written on that feedback? And then they can use that to inform what they're working on next. So it's, again, helping them with their study skills, helping develop their independence, and helping them take responsibility for their own learning as well. So as I mentioned earlier, we're going to have a look at formative feedback form examples. Now, as I've reiterated, you don't have to use this form. This is just a tool for you to carry out learner-focused formative feedback. Okay, so you can see the formative feedback sheet in front of you. Now this, a blank copy is available on the Quality Portal Padlet, and it can be emailed out as well. So as you can see from this form, I mean, some tutors have made this A5 size because that works better for them. Some tutors have photocopied it in a different coloured paper so that it stands out in learner folders as well. So if we just go through it then, so what went well? So this is tailored towards an English learner. So what went well? Well done, you completed the practice paper under time conditions. You've used at least 4 language techniques in your writing. You've applied the correct format to write a letter and an article, and you've attempted to write in paragraphs using full sentences. So again, it's very short, it's very smart, sharp, it's very measurable. Even better if you expand your paragraphs to ensure that you meet the word count of at least 250 to 300 words. You include at least 2 idioms in your next piece of writing, and you use the homophone there, they are, and there correctly. Now what I wanted to pick out there is the words at least 2 idioms. Again, when we're looking at how the learner can develop, it's really important not to put a cap on what they've got to do, because if you say they've only got to do 2, the chances are they will only do 2. So if you're putting at least 2, it gives that opportunity to really stretch and develop them. So the next steps for this learner are, the first one is to review the PEAL focus task. So PEAL stands for Point, Evidence, Explain and Link, and rewrite at least 3 of your paragraphs using this format. Number 2 is complete the idioms matching activity. And number 3 is correct homophone errors in your writing using a different coloured pen. Okay, now you don't need to be an English specialist to pick out the key points there really in terms of how it's been written. So it's very directive, it's achievable as well. So in terms of making it time bound, when you're going through this feedback with the learner, or when the learner's looking at it independently, or if the learner is listening to it or looking at it on a handwritten on a piece of work or typed on a piece of work, you can negotiate in terms of the timescales for completions of those next steps to really make it smart. And then what's quite a nice idea is that for each next step, if a deadline is set next to it, once the learner has achieved it and once it's been signed off, it can be ticked, initials next to it, so that you're closing that loop, so that you can, it's documented and it's evidenced, and and the learner knows progress has been made. Because often with a lot of feedback's given and sometimes it falls by the wayside, sometimes it's just looked at once and then it's disregarded. This is meant to be a tool in order to drive progress and drive and support tracking as well. So it helps you as a tutor to track the progress of those learners, to see whether they've achieved what has been set. It helps the learner to track where they're up to as well, and then this can inform what they're writing in the ILP in terms of target setting and reviewing the progress that they've made. So again, just to reiterate, it is this formative feedback sheet, it is just a tool. I've always said one size doesn't fit all. So if this tool doesn't work for you, I've already gone through a lot of other ways that it could be adapted and incorporated to meet the needs of your learners and to meet the needs of you. Now, when you actually get a copy of this formative feedback sheet, on the back of this sheet, we have got the spelling, punctuation and grammar DALS policy on the back of it, just for reference. And then I forgot to mention, just at the bottom there, spellings, vocabulary and definitions for the learner. So again, it's just a nice little area there, embedding English and maths, if there's a need to pick up any spellings, vocabulary or definitions, just to embed those key skills as well. Okay, so what have we done as DALS? So this whole service strategy, it was launched during CPD back at the end of term 1, and it is a whole service strategy. So there have been a range of CPD sessions for teaching staff to learn about this strategy and support as well, supporting them to incorporate it into their practice. Again, hopefully this video sees you well if you haven't received any of that CPD or if you want a refresher. Additional learning support staff have received bespoke training as well as to how they can support learners with it also. So their role is very different to a tutor's role. So they're aware of it, and so that they can work towards the same goals in terms of what the tutor's trying to achieve. Career staff have also received bespoke training as well to help them understand it in terms of their roles when working with learners, because again, it's very different to a tutor's and additional learning support. It's been incorporated into lesson observation action plans. So this academic year, we've followed the new education spectrum framework and carried out deep dives. So again, this has been taken into consideration with that feedback and subsequent action plans as well. And then, as I've already mentioned, it's been put up in all the classrooms across the service. So it's about a mindset. It's about using this pedagogy and this ethos behind it to really drive a targeted approach to enabling that learners make progress, so that there's tracking and monitoring of learner progress, and that we're closing the loop in terms of the feedback that learners receive. And the feedback that learners receive is valuable. It can be used in a practical sense, so that we're continually working towards and building on existing knowledge and skills. And then here's just an example of one of our classroom displays. So again, as I mentioned before, if you wanted to take this image and include it within your resources, if you're delivering online, you're more than welcome to. Okay, this comes to the end of the presentation. So what I think would be really good is to take this question into consideration. Bearing in mind from September, a lot of our learning is going to be distance learning, blended learning, flipped learning. It's going to be very different to what we have ever done before. So how will you incorporate this into the new online or distance learning format? I'll be really interested and happy to receive any emails with ideas of how you propose to do this, or any ideas as to how to do it. Be really happy to receive some ideas, and then what I will do is I will collate all those ideas and I'll share them as an ideas bank on the Quality Portal Padlet, because it's now more important than ever that as a service and as a team we are working together, we are sharing ideas so that we can learn from one another and help find solutions to any barriers or challenges that we have with this new way of working. So please email any ideas or any questions to natalie.jameson-warren@derby.gov.uk. Thank you.